what are the challenges in managing cloud resources in general and also finding orphans? One is a lack of full visibility into cloud environments. You might be thinking, well, hey, there's lots of reports that you can pull from cloud provider tools and from third-party tools that will list all your stuff, and that's true, but that doesn't really, that's not how humans work, right? We don't think in terms of spreadsheets, and it can be really hard to contextualize these things. So what we like to do at Fugue is to provide this information visually, because humans are really good at identifying those things. So full visibility doesn't just mean the thing is on a list somewhere. It means it's known what it's doing. It is a known state of what it's doing, who owns it, things like that. Dave's going to get into this more, but a lot of times this is due to insufficient tagging and tagging conventions, or also naming conventions, and insufficient auditing and control capabilities. Let's jump to the next one. Right, so why do these happen? Very often we've seen leftover maintenance infrastructure. Somebody has to stand up some stuff to do work in the cloud environment. Maybe they're using infrastructure as code most of the time, but when a trouble ticket comes in and things need to be debugged, they might fall back to the console, not tag things, and forget they're out there. Poor management practices that fail to track and cull resources, things like EBS volumes, AMIs, EC2 instances. If you're not fully leveraging infrastructure as code, or honestly, even if you are, it's pretty easy to lose track of these. Lack of tags and tag enforcement policies, we've mentioned, and dev environment leftovers. Dev environments are attack surface. There are lots of examples of how dev environments have been used by bad guys in really sophisticated cases to do things like code injection. But even learning the topology of a system by exploring a dev environment helps them break into production. So these things need security too. And the fundamental cause of all this is, human beings are just really bad at managing complexity at scale. We're good at abstracting, we're good at intuition, we're good at being creative. We're really bad at remembering very long lists of things. But the good news is we have these wonderful devices called computers and programming that are awesome at managing complexity at scale. And because cloud is made of APIs, we can use the tools of software engineering to do that. Let's go to the next slide. So why do these things form a security risk? Well, going back to some of the earlier examples I gave of attacks where people are scanning for things that have vulnerabilities. Well, what's the prevention to that, right, is yourself scanning and catching vulnerabilities prior to bad guys doing it. Well, if something's orphaned, you're not going to be looking at it with your tools. You're not going to be assessing it. You're not going to be validating them for compliance. If it's running an operating system like an EC2 instance, they're probably not going to be patched. And therefore, as new vulnerabilities are found in whatever libraries and applications you're using, they're not getting patched. Those show up on the radar when the bad guys scan that IP address. They're not being cycled out via immutable infrastructure practices. So what we mean by immutable infrastructure is instead of maintaining things, you replace them. So instead of patching a server, you stand up a new one and kill the old one. A lot more of that with things like containers these days. But a lot of folks have infrastructure that either doesn't work that way and can't, or they haven't configured to work that way and should. But immutable infrastructure patterns do really help with this. Netflix is famous for their chaos engineering and full automation. That's really what to aim for. And then finally, attacks that are exploiting these orphan resources, often the attacks themselves are likely to go unnoticed because you're not paying much attention to the resources, right? They're orphaned, you're not looking for those. And so that creates the kind of scenario where, for example, in some recent news, there was a big breach that went unnoticed for over 120 days, I think almost 130. So these are the big reasons why you should think of every orphaned resource as attack surface, and it's more vulnerable than the things you're managing.